Hello everybody, and welcome to the first video of the Halloween season of 2025, where we're going to be talking about a movie that, after watching it, makes one wish that they had done literally anything else. Perhaps even this. Are you a fan of perfect nipple placement?
You got perfect nipple placement, baby.
Well, then I've got a movie made just for you. So, sit back, relax, and get your machetes ready, folks, as we take a spoiler-heavy look at Friday the 13th, 2009. But before we get into that, I've been stuck at 1,600 subs for almost a year. So, if you could do me a favor and press the subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, here we go. So, Friday the 13th, 2009 starts like any great movie, by showing us the end of a movie that actually doesn't exist. What do I mean by that? Well, in the movie's opening credit sequence, we get the Cliff Notes version of the original Friday the 13th. You see, in this rebooted timeline, the events of the first film still technically happen. Camp Crystal Lake reopens, Pamela Voorhees kills everybody, and eventually her head is cut off with a machete. Unfortunately for her, Jason was never actually dead. In fact, he's been alive this whole time, which means that the carnage at Crystal Lake wasn't so much a tragedy as it was a hilarious misunderstanding. Anyway, we've got boobs to look at. So, let's move on. The movie then cuts to Crystal Lake in the present day, which, in the case of this movie, was the year 2009, a happier and simpler time. When Miley Cyrus was at the top of the charts, Avatar wowed the world with its special effects, and a global outbreak of swine flu led to the deaths of nearly 300,000 people. And it's here that we meet our first set of characters. There's Whitney, her boyfriend Mike, who wants to have sex in a tent.
Have sex with your boyfriend in a cramped little tent.
Amanda and Richie, who also want to have sex in a tent. And finally, Wade, an obnoxious stoner who is so annoying that him having friends is the most unbelievable part of this movie.
I'm a fucking idiot.
So, why are these 30-something teens out camping in the woods? Well, drugs. You see, Wade has told Richie that he heard from a guy who heard from someone else that there's a hidden crop of marijuana plants out there just waiting to be harvested and sold for a fortune. Now, how does someone manage to plant an entire crop of weed in a forest that's patrolled by Jason and live to tell anybody about it? Well, I don't know. But what I do know is that you can't have a Friday the 13th movie without drugs.
Heavy shit.
I also know that these characters, the reason they're here, who they are, and their relationships to one another don't actually matter. Other than Whitney, who will end up being the movie's final girl, these characters really only serve one purpose: to be torn apart by Jason in various ways. So, for the sake of everyone's time, we'll just skip to that stuff. Ignoring the guidelines set by the Boy Scouts of America regarding safety when camping, the group separates into 3 separate, yet easy-to-kill groups. First, Wade goes for a walk and gets a machete to the face. Then, Richie and Amanda decide to have sex, resulting in Richie getting his leg caught in a bear trap and Amanda roasting like chestnuts over an open fire.
That's probably why you smell burnt hair.
Meanwhile, as all this carnage is happening at the campsite, Whitney and Mike have decided to go for a walk through the ruins of Camp Crystal Lake, where they just so happen to discover a quaint little cabin that needs just a little bit of work.
It just seems a little pricey for a unique fixer-upper opportunity, that's all.
After finding the head of Mrs. Voorhees in the wall, it becomes clear that it's going to take more than an open floor concept to save this cabin, and to make matters worse, Jason stabs Mike through the floor and drags him to his death. Confident that Mike can easily be replaced, Whitney abandons him without a second thought and runs back to the campsite just in time to see Richie catch a CGI machete to the head and for Jason to chase her into a title card. That's right, folks. This whole sequence, from the flashback at the campsite to this very moment, has been a cold open. For those of you not familiar with the term, a cold open is essentially a prologue, and it's typically used to set up the plot and the characters. When they're done well, the audience can get invested in the story quickly without having to spend too much time on lengthy exposition, which could become tedious and hinder the movie's pacing. However, the cold open for this movie is almost 20 minutes long, and in that time, the only thing relevant to the story that was established is that Whitney looks like Jason's mother.
Hey, it looks like you.
Other than that, all that happens is that we spend way too much time with characters that are just going to get killed immediately, which causes this movie's cold open to bog the movie down rather than introducing the story efficiently, which is what every good cold open is supposed to do. I could talk more about this cold open, but we've got more boobs to look at.
The kids are fucking just so juicy.
So let's just move on. The movie then cuts to 6 weeks later, where we are introduced to more characters. There's Trent, the rich douchebag, Jenna, his girlfriend, Trent's best friend Nolan, as well as his girlfriend Chelsea and her friend Bree, who I think might be played by the same person, and of course, the resident stoners of the group, Chewie and Lawrence, all of whom are about to meet a terrible end and will be reciting the insightful and intelligent dialogue that the Friday the 13th franchise has come to be known for.
Your tits are stupendous.
Came about that close to hitting the start button on a whoop-ass machine, boy.
That's not a good look for you, man. You can ask the one black guy to pump the gas for you?
But the owner makes the rules, and he's a real...
As our group of friends make a quick stop to get gas and grab some snacks, they run into Clay, Whitney's brother, who is asking permission to place missing posters in the window of the store. As it turns out, looking for a missing sibling who might be dead is really inconvenient, causing the checkout line to get backed up and Clay and Travis to have a slight disagreement.
You okay, bro?
But I'm not your bro.
I'm not your buddy, friend. He's not your friend, guy.
This momentary spat isn't enough to get Trent and his friends down because they're on their way to Crystal Lake to spend the weekend at a lake house doing all the things that will surely get you killed in a slasher movie, like drinking, drugs, and of course, sex.
You can never have sex. Sex equals death.
Unfortunately for Clay, things are not quite as fun. Other than the fact that he's looking for his missing sister, he seems to be caught in a never-ending series of horror cliches, where he encounters a local cop who tells him to stop looking for answers.
But there's no evidence that anything happened to Whitney Miller or any of those other kids in Crystal Lake.
Strange elderly people who seem to have a vague knowledge about the town.
People go missing around here, they're gone for good.
And hillbilly farmhands who molest department store mannequins.
You remember that special night we had? Remember when you took my virginity?
You know what? That's unfair. I'm sure he's actually a really nice guy. And honestly, I hope nothing bad happens to him for this entire movie. Oh well, this is also where Jason finds his hockey mask, completing his iconic look that everyone has come to know. Unfortunately, though, this moment isn't followed by someone getting shot in the eye with an arrow, which kind of makes it a letdown. Back at the lake house, the party is in full swing. The drinks are flowing, the drugs are kicking in, and it's only a matter of time till things get out of control. Nolan and Chelsea have different plans. They want to go to the other side of the lake and explore the natural beauty of the great outdoors. But as they leave the house, they're told by Trent to not touch his family's boat under any circumstances, which of course causes this to happen. Overcome with excitement, Nolan takes a moment to reflect on just how great his life truly is. He's on a beautiful lake, driving a really expensive boat, and his hot girlfriend is waterboarding topless. And the only thing that could ruin this perfect weekend would be if he was to be shot in the head by an arrow. But what are the chances of that happening? Wow, I guess those archery trophies in Jason's cabin weren't just for decoration, huh? Hold on, wait a minute. Jason also has a hockey trophy. Does this mean Jason was on a Pee-wee hockey team? Not long after Nolan takes an arrow to the head, Chelsea takes a boat to the head. And somehow, she isn't immediately killed, which honestly seems unlikely. I mean, out of all the things that could kill you, you'd think that 3,000 pounds of high-speed fiberglass would be one of them, but I guess not. One of the things that will kill you is a machete through the skull, which is exactly how Jason kills Chelsea as we get one more look at what made her so popular in high school. Boobs. Continuing his mission to look for his sister, Clay ends up at Trent's lake house, where he runs into Jenna. Unfortunately for Clay, that means he'll have to deal with Trent being a dickhead. But luckily for Clay, Jenna wants to bone him immediately. So much so that she decides to leave the house and help Clay explore the other side of the lake, much to Trent's dismay. Don't worry too much about Trent, folks. He may have gotten his feelings hurt, but trust me when I say he's going to recover from this broken heart pretty quickly. After walking around all day, talking about how great Whitney is, Clay and Jenna eventually end up at Camp Crystal Lake, where they spend the rest of the day looking for clues that might tell them what happened to Whitney. After almost giving up on their search, a big clue drops right in front of them. Coming back to the camp after a long day of murder, Jason returns with a headless body. Seeing Clay's backpack lying on the ground, Jason goes into a rampage, turning on the camp floodlights, turning over canoes, and looking everywhere to find the location of the person who has trespassed on his home. This is also the part of the movie where we learn that Jason's weakness is his peripheral vision, because Clay and Jenna are hiding just slightly to Jason's left and he somehow doesn't see them. I mean, they're literally right there, like 10 feet away, practically out in the open, and somehow he doesn't see them. So, remember folks, if you ever have to run away from Jason, just stand slightly off to the side and everything should be okay. Anyway, back at the house, the party is starting to wind down. Chewie is goofing off in the tool shed, and Lawrence is jerking off in the living room, while Bree and Trent decide to brush up on their human anatomy.
Kids are fucking just so juicy.
Suddenly, Jenna and Clay arrive back at the house, interrupting Lawrence before things get too sticky and warning everyone that Jason is outside, patrolling the lake, and looking for victims. Unfortunately for Chewie, he doesn't get this warning. Determined to save his friend, and armed with a wok as a shield, Lawrence goes out to the shed, where he is promptly killed with an axe. So now that the characters are dropping like flies, everyone starts to panic. Well, everyone except for Trent. You see, like every great American, he refuses to go down without a fight. Remembering the words of Patrick Henry, who said, "Give me liberty or give me death," Trent decides to defend himself by summoning his patriotic spirit and exercising his Second Amendment rights. After all, what's the worst that could happen?
I'm here.
Bree, on the other hand, has decided to do what she does best and approach this situation without any pants. A strategy that sadly doesn't really work out in the end. And now, it's with a heavy heart that we have to say goodbye to Bree. She may have been a relationship-wrecking whore, but more importantly than that, she was hot. And because of that, she will live forever in our hearts. Then, Trent, Jenna, and Clay decide to split up and make a run for it. While Clay and Jenna continue to run through the woods, Trent has managed to make his way to the road, where he stops a man in a truck for help. Then, for some reason, Trent doesn't approach the truck or say anything to the guy inside it. He just stands in the road and points his flashlight at the truck over and over again. You would think that someone who just spent an hour watching their friends be murdered would get in this truck without any hesitation. But for some reason, he doesn't, which leads to the most brutal yet hilarious moment in this entire movie. Having made it back to the camp, Jenna and Clay search desperately for somewhere to hide. Why would they want to hide in the same place where they just saw Jason hiding a headless body? I don't know. But they do manage to discover a hidden door, which leads to Jason's underground tunnels, where they find Whitney. Unfortunately, this family reunion has to be cut short, because Jason is still in hot pursuit. So much so that Jenna is killed, something that Clay and Whitney don't seem to be too torn up about, and the two of them run into a nearby barn to hide. Oh look, this barn has a wood chipper. Deciding that she doesn't want to see her brother turned into compost, Whitney distracts Jason by doing something similar to what Ginny did in Friday the 13th Part 2, which gives Clay enough time to wrap a chain around Jason's neck, get him caught in the wood chipper, and Whitney the opportunity to do this.
Say hi to Mommy! In hell!
The next morning, Whitney and Clay are at the dock, where they decide to give Jason a water burial. So why didn't they just leave? Because of this.
This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare.
And that's it. That's the remake of Friday the 13th. Is it good? No. Is it worth watching? Well, also, no. Now, in the spirit of fairness, I would like to mention that there are a couple of things that the movie does well. Making Jason a faster and more calculated killer is a smart reimagining of the character. I also think that condensing previously established lore into one movie instead of retreading those elements again in sequels was also a smart decision. Being a franchise that had been around for nearly 30 years at the time, most people already know that Jason is the guy in the hockey mask that kills campers in the woods. Retreading all those moments again throughout a rebooted franchise would have prevented filmmakers from focusing on new ideas. So, getting Jason into his iconic state quickly was a good choice. Unfortunately, there's not much left good that I can say about the movie, because it's painfully generic. Not only for a Friday the 13th movie, which are all basically the same movie, but also an early 2000s horror movie. For those of you who don't know, horror movies from the early 2000s all pretty much look the same, featuring 20-something CW stars, overly polished cinematography, and a high production value. However, Friday the 13th as a franchise has always had a slight sleaze factor to it. Made on shoestring budgets with lots of sex and gore, they often look more like grindhouse movies rather than a film released by a big movie studio. And while this may seem like a strange point to bring up, the abandonment of that aesthetic in favor of what was the convention at the time prevents this movie from visually standing out from its peers. The movie is also boring to watch, primarily for two reasons. The first of which is the lack of interesting kills. Throughout the history of the franchise, it's featured some truly memorable character deaths, like the arrow through the throat in Part 1, the frozen face smash in Jason X, and, my personal favorite, Mark's death in Part 2. The kills have always been a highlight of the franchise. If you're wanting to reboot a long-established franchise, the last thing you would want to do is take away one of the things that have kept the audiences returning for nearly 3 decades. Secondly, the characters in this movie are exceptionally bad, even for a Friday the 13th movie, with little to no personality and overall are just uninteresting to watch. As I said earlier, the details about characters of Friday the 13th don't really matter, because they're just all cannon fodder for Jason. In the past, even though the writing behind those characters has been bad, the actors have been able to make them memorable.
Hey, you okay?
Some damn enchiladas!
Aside from Lawrence and Chewie, who do have funny moments here and there, the rest of the characters are pretty forgettable, and they seem to be played by Abercrombie & Fitch models instead of actors. Furthermore, the character that's always been the best in every Friday the 13th has been the final girl. Being the protagonist of the movies, we follow them throughout each movie and become invested in whether they live or die, even if the characters themselves don't have much depth. The final girl in this movie, Whitney, is only on screen for about 15 minutes, and in that short time, all we know about her is that she looks like Jason's mom. The final girl and the kills have been the cornerstones of every Friday the 13th movie. When you consider that the filmmakers couldn't get those elements correct, then it's no wonder that this movie never got a sequel. So, at the end of the day, would I recommend this movie? No, not really. While it certainly is a slicker, more polished Friday the 13th, it never really feels like one. The best way I can describe it is that it's kind of like listening to a talented band cover a song, but they don't do anything to make it their own. Kind of like when Weezer covered Africa by Toto. If you're just going to play the same song that everyone's heard before, then what's the point of covering the song in the first place? Likewise, if a movie studio wants to remake a franchise, but decides to just make the same thing that you've already seen, then what's the point of remaking it in the first place?